Welcome, everyone. This is Dr. Alana. Today's 15 minutes is about translating research language. So let me just tell you how I got started with this one. I was talking to a dean of a school who is a medical environment, and she had concerns that when the words I used about research wouldn't fit her population. And that got me thinking about the fact that in the approach to research and the mindset and the logic we use for research is the same across all of our fields. But when and how would language get in the way of that? So that's what kicks off this 15 minutes. Why is translation between fields important? This is a diagram of many words that are being used today. Intradisciplinary one, multidisciplinary, each still having its own silo of language. Cross-disciplinary or comparative research, still individuals, but closer together. Interdisciplinary, overlapping, and then transdisciplinary. It's a new word. Maybe the meaning is a little fuzzy, but it means the disciplines are really trying to merge their language. Last week, I hope some of you were there, we talked about transfer. So we're in one field, we're looking in one direction, and then we take the ideology and the words and the everything, creativity, moments from that, and we transfer it to another field, something either very close, like I learned it and now I can talk about it, that's near transfer, or I learned it and now I'm completely extrapolating it to another field, that's far transfer. And it's a stepping stone for all of our creative thought. So we're on the same pathway for the last 3 weeks. We talked about self-regulation, we've talked about transfer, and now this kind of is the capstone on it. How do we mix it all up across our fields? And very interesting things coming up. So this is a list from Lit on the reasons our ability to do these kinds of things is important. The 3 that stand out for me are that creativity often requires our ability to translate from one place to another, one field to another, that many of the problems we face as the world will require this of us. So we just have to get good at it. And that by bridging these communication gaps, we're also perhaps helping the world to mobilize all of our intellectual resource to solve some of our problems. And given that the world is sort of at a knife's edge of the challenges we face, this is all good stuff. And I've given you the links and all of this, all of these are in slides. So if you want to go follow through on where I got these, please do. All right, so agenda. I'm going to talk about what it takes. I'm going to talk about what does it mean to our practice, and then we'll answer questions. So what does it take? Some random things that run in the background. First off, this happens in both STEM and the humanities, although it started as an idea in the humanities, social sciences, primarily because they were the first ones to become impatient with our academic silos. In the STEM fields, there's good data. This is a really interesting article I've given you, that if we are good at this, we are more likely, our research is more likely to breed patents. And that's excellent. That's excellent for universities. It's excellent for research development monies, for ourselves as independent researchers. It's just excellent. And then finally, technology influences all of this. So it requires of us that we be able to merge some of these things. And there was an article specifically, Erica, who comes who comes frequently, is currently in the midst of this kind of interdisciplinary research between archaeology using remote sensing. So technology pushes us to do this kind of work. All right, so types, and you can read this. It's this is one man's idea of how we might use this, but I wanted to point out the verbs. So to modify, to solve, to elaborate, to apply, to integrate, those all come up again, especially when it has to do with complex issues. And you'll see how that plays out in a minute. So when should you consider taking your ideas and exploring interdisciplinary work? And then what will it require of you? And that's how we're going to get into the topical area of language. Well, if you're looking at a problem that you want to modify, solve, elaborate, apply something to, and it's complex, then perhaps you have fertile ground for interdisciplinary work. Now, a caveat for you in graduate school is that there are a lot of academic barriers that make this difficult in a university environment. Many articles came up about how difficult just our way of publishing makes it difficult because we're sending to a journal that has sort of one idea about it. Now that's breaking down and more interdisciplinary things are happening, but it does perhaps limit your choices even as it expands your choices. Still, there's a lot of things we might want to study where our outcomes want to modify, solve, elaborate, or apply something new. So the first thing that, say this looks good, like, yeah, I have these ideas in my field, and I want to mix them up and apply things from other fields. How do I go about that? And then one of the first steps is best opportunities is to look at interdisciplinary design and to decide whether or not you can come up with some unified goals and outcomes for different people. And I've given you a citation for a study in 2010 where they did exactly that. It was a case study in architecture. So I've got a field of study, I've got a problem, I found some things over here and here that may just really apply to this. It's a ripe opportunity. What do I need to do? Well, I need to consider, and this is where we get into the words, each of the fields that we are merging together will have different rules about credibility. They'll have different language they want to use. Perhaps they will favor different methodological or theoretical choices. So that requires some critical analysis. Got to know the playing ground we're trying to merge. Perhaps we want to draw that out. And then you might, at some point in this exploration, see whether or not you can find examples of integrated thinking in those fields and what it sounds like. So I did that for education, and I'll read you. This is about the integration of STEM thinking as an educator with other types of thought. Integrated STEM is not just another buzzword. It is not just about science, technology, engineering, and math. It is about how to use science as a hook for students and then to bring in numeracy and literacy. Science is complex. Think of literacy and numeracy skills that can be developed while using science. Then take it to the next level, the history of how the world works, social studies, and History must be part of the conversation. We must learn from the past in order to build to the future. Technology is more than a computer or an iPhone. It's actually closer to literacy skills when you think about coding and understanding language behind computer skills. And engineering is design thinking. It's a process that allows for design, measuring, testing, analyzing, improving, and reviewing. This cycle can then be seen in everything from cooking to designing the next rocket to space. Therefore, the crux of integrated STEM is for students to understand the connections among subjects that they are in which they are involved in their own learning, because they are able to understand the relevance of what they are learning beyond the classroom. So that's how an educator thinks about merging topics. It changes the language. It changes our, we're talking about STEM, and therefore we lay out this kind of a linear pattern. It's no longer a linear pattern of thought. And therefore, it's, to take us back full cycle to what I did 2 weeks ago, it's a prime target for self-regulated learning, because then you have to see the whole thing and divide up how you're going to put the pieces together in a non-linear fashion. And then I looked up some research for you. It's on the things that happen with words. It's very useful if you're doing integrated work, interdisciplinary work, to work in teams where different people hold the language of the different parts you're trying to integrate, so that the team can talk about how you say things. There's a case study here that talked about that exact thing in geography. And so it goes on to say that geography is poised between two sciences, and he chose just 3 words, dialectic, metaphor, and articulation, as 3 words that would cause different kinds of problems. No, actually, the 3 words, excuse me, were dynamic, mapping, and catchment. So he took those 3 words and kind of broke them apart. It's interesting if you want to delve into it, and I've given you the link in the handouts. So now we're moving our ideas, we're merging them together, we're perhaps working with different fields, and then what is it going to take you as a student who may be using this degree to step out in the world and get a better job, move to a different part of the world, do something interesting with your life as a result. And all the literature says that there are vast numbers of interdisciplinary sciences and cross-silo opportunities. And I gave you some links here about seeing beyond the silos in the context of sustainability. Here's another one that's it talks about the pressure of publishing that I mentioned, bringing silos into the biosciences. And then this last one I kind of highlight for you because I thought it was a little odd. They're talking about science engagement professionals. What is a science engagement professional? By taking, merging things, we may be at risk of coming up with yet another set of languages that talk about the merged part. Okay, so this section is the overview of all the ideas that impinge upon how we do this well. If you have questions, I will take them in a minute and it's www.wooclap.com/15 minutes. We already have 4 questions. I'm happy to take them. But I wanted to talk about what is this ideas. I'm a practitioner researcher. So all of this just makes me a little crazy unless I can bring it home to my practice. So here are 2 just set of small steps you might want to consider. Have you identified a problem? And is that problem what they would call wicked or complex? So if you don't know those words, you need to look them up. And then who are the stakeholders who care about this problem? Do they come from different fields? If you get yeses for that, then your problem is probably a prime target for an interdisciplinary study. Do you want to modify, solve, elaborate, apply, address? If those are verbs that fit for you too, then consider this. And the second step would then be to just bring some people together from the fields that might merge well in this, just to have a conversation, just a discussion, and to find out whether and to what extent there's some interest and whether there's some resource to study these things together. And would it be a formal investigation or an informal investigation? I think in graduate school, you're all, because you have a timeline to finish, your minds are very much on the formal investigation. But you can do informal work as a group, meeting together, and take an idea a long way, and then pull that out and make it the more formal investigation for your degree. So not to say this has to be a one or the other solution. If there is interest but no resource, maybe people can just talk to each other, proceed, be creative, communicate, and ResearchGate. If you want to take any of the things we're talking about here, as I would be if I was, and I've kind of looked at whether or not there's any interdisciplinary options with what I'm doing right now. One of the first things I do is whip up a project in ResearchGate and see what happened. Because there I'd be pulling from a global community of researchers. So I'll come back to bookclap.com/15 minutes in just a minute. But I want to point out two things this week. Thursday, this time, is the pre-proposal research group. So if any of you are designing your research, putting it together, master's or doctoral, doesn't matter, that you're in that don't have data yet phase, please consider coming at this time on Thursday. It's a good group of people. You get lots of questions answered. You get a sense of community, and everybody leaves feeling hopeful, is what people say to me. And then if you are someone who wants to push the edge of grad excellence, or you're at one of the R1 institutions that has a great deal of have to do everything right about it, I want to kick off the grad excellence group with talking a little bit about rigor, but also questioning if any of you are going towards proposal, either defensive proposal or your final defense in the next few months. Please consider the grad excellence group as a place where you could practice your slides. Everybody learns from that, and you have a rough draft that can help you. And finally, we've had lots of interest in the synchronous writing group on Wednesdays, also at this time, but little difficulty getting in. So again, the slides are there. It's a PDF, so that link should work, and I tested it today.